ever find yourself like totally hunched over your keyboard wondering who designed this thing? Or maybe you've picked up a new phone or something and thought, wow, this feels amazing to use.
Totally.
That right there, that's the world of ergonomics in action. And today we are diving deep into what a career in this honestly surprisingly fascinating field actually looks like.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Most people, they don't think about ergonomics like at all until they're in pain, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then suddenly it's like all you can think about. What I think is so interesting about ergonomics is that it's so much more than just like, oh, is this chair comfy? It's
mm-hmm.
really about like understanding how we interact with the world around us
Yeah.
and then designing these products and systems that work with our bodies, not against them.
Okay, so no more wrestling with my office chair then.
Hopefully not.
Sign me up. So let's break it down. What do ergonomists actually do all day?
You know, I was looking at what RoleCatcher put together, and they actually gave a great explanation of this.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, they're like design detectives in a way,
I like that.
always looking for ways to make things better. Like how people interact with computers, or their workspace, or a tool, or just an everyday object, really.
It's true even like how a door handle is shaped. Right.
Yeah, like they think about the angle of a chair, the placement of buttons on a thing you're using, all of it to make sure it's safe, comfy, and that you can use it effectively.
So it's like they have this X-ray vision for seeing potential problems
Kind of.
before they even become a problem, which I think is really cool. And what's interesting is RoleCatcher pointed out this isn't just about preventing like a repetitive stress injury or something. It can actually have a huge impact on how productive people are, even like a company's bottom line.
It's true. I think there was a study, and it found that bringing in ergonomic solutions in an office or something led to way fewer musculoskeletal disorders.
Wow.
Yeah, like a 25% drop.
That's huge.
And productivity actually went up like 10%.
That makes so much sense. If you're not uncomfortable, you're going to get more done, be more focused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When people aren't fighting with their chair or whatever, they can just work.
Everyone wins. Okay, so it seems like there's a ton of potential in this career path, but be honest, how do you actually become an ergonomist? Is there like a special school?
Right. I wish it was
Yeah.
that easy.
Right.
But you are thinking along the right lines. Like, while there might not be a whole university dedicated to this,
Jet.
exactly.
Yeah.
There are very specific degrees and stuff you can get. And RoleCatcher mentioned some of them, like a straight up degree in ergonomics, but then also one in human factors, which I think is really cool.
It does sound very official.
It does, doesn't it? But it makes sense. Human factors, it's all about how humans interact with like systems and technology.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But what about someone who is maybe coming from a more creative background? So say they studied industrial design, could they do something with ergonomics?
For sure. And RoleCatcher specifically mentioned that.
Yeah.
That kind of background can be so valuable. Think about it. Industrial designers, they're already thinking about how things look, how people use things, that user experience part of it.
Totally.
That all translates so well to this, to designing a workspace or a product.
Yeah, for sure. And I was surprised that psychology is also helpful in this field.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because ergonomics isn't just about like back pain or whatever, right?
Mhm.
It's mental too. Like, how does this environment make me feel stressed, relaxed, whatever?
Yeah.
A psychologist would think about all that.
That's true. That's wild how all this stuff is connected. It sounds like you need to understand both people, but also design.
100%.
Okay, so the education is important, obviously, but I'm guessing you need some real-world experience too, right? Like you can't just read it in a book.
You're totally right. RoleCatcher was very clear about that. Practical experience is key, they said.
Mhm.
And they actually recommend that even while you're studying, get an internship or volunteer somewhere, do whatever you can to start building up your skills.
So you can actually apply what you're learning, see how it plays out in the real world.
Yeah. You got to have a portfolio too, things you can show people.
So you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the schooling part of it and the experience part, but what does that career path actually look like? So you graduate, you've done a few internships, what's next?
Well, RoleCatcher walked us through those typical career stages, which I thought was really helpful.
Awesome, so what's first?
Well, it's not always exactly the same for everyone, but they all start with an entry-level role. Like, that's where you really learn by doing,
Like the boot camp.
right. You're fresh out of school, eager to use everything you just learned, but you're still developing your practical skills.
I imagine those first few jobs are a wild ride, so what kinds of things would an entry-level ergonomist be doing?
Okay, so imagine this. You get brought into a manufacturing plant.
Okay.
And your task is to observe workers and try to spot any potential ergonomic problems.
So it's like you're an ergonomic detective.
Exactly.
I love it.
So are the workers reaching for things in an awkward way? Are they using too much force? Do they have any signs of injuries? It's all about using your training to see these things.
That most people probably wouldn't even notice.
Right. And then you'd start collecting data, like maybe using some special software to analyze their postures or measure the force they're using.
Oh, wow.
You might even talk to the workers and just ask what feels uncomfortable to them.
So you're gathering all the clues.
Right. You got to put together a picture of what's going on, what needs to change.
Okay, so you figured out the problems. What's next?
And this is where it gets fun. This is where you get to problem solve. As the entry-level person, you'd work with people who have more experience than you.
Okay, so it's a team effort.
Totally.
Yeah.
They'd help you brainstorm solutions, whether it's rearranging the workstations, finding new tools, or maybe even coming up with some training for the employees so they know how to, like, lift things safely or whatever.
It's like you said, blending that fresh perspective with the experience of those seasoned professionals.
Right. But I imagine as you move up, like you become a junior ergonomist, you'd get to take on more responsibility, like maybe come up with those solutions yourself.
You become the leader.
Right. You're not just spotting the problems anymore. You're designing solutions, putting them in place.
I like it.
So you might be doing more in-depth assessments using your knowledge of how the body works, how people move.
But there's a real science to it.
Oh, yeah, big time. You got to know your stuff. It's not just about making things feel better.
Right.
It's about making sure they actually are better, safer, more effective. And, I bet as you become even more experienced, you could specialize, like maybe in a certain industry or something.
Oh, interesting. Like, what are some examples?
Well, RoleCatcher had a bunch listed. Like, you could do this in a manufacturing plant, which we just talked about, or healthcare, tech, even research.
So many options.
I know. You could help architects design an ergonomic office, work with engineers to make safer tools, or even help design software that's easier to use.
That's really cool. And I bet this field is only going to grow as technology changes, right? We're all on our computers, we're on our phones constantly.
Exactly. The demand for people who get this is only getting bigger.
Makes you think. So we've talked about the good stuff, but let's be real. What are some of the more difficult parts of this career? Did RoleCatcher mention any drawbacks?
They did. One of the big ones is that you might run into people who just don't want to change. Like, you might have the best idea ever, but good luck convincing management to spend the money to actually make it happen.
Oh, for sure. Or even just getting people to try something new.
Totally. People can be so stuck in their ways.
That must be a challenge. How would an ergonomist, deal with that?
Well, this is where those communication skills come in.
Okay.
You got to be able to explain those ergonomic ideas really clearly, and not just that it'll be safer or whatever, but also that it'll save the company money. People will be happier.
You got to sell it.
Totally.
So you're not just an ergonomics expert, but also a salesperson?
Right. And you got to be willing to always be learning. Ergonomics is constantly changing as technology changes.
That's a good point. It's not like you just learn it once and you're good.
Nope. You got to keep up with it.
I could see how that would be challenging for some people, but also kind of exciting,
Totally.
You're never bored. So we've talked a lot about becoming an ergonomist, but we haven't talked about how to actually get the job.
True. And luckily, RoleCatcher had a lot to say about that too.
They did. And it's so helpful to see, how could my career actually grow,
Yeah.
And they start with, we were talking about that entry-level role,
Yeah.
and they described it as, really hands-on.
Oh, cool.
Which makes sense, right?
You're brand new.
You're getting your feet wet.
So if you're that new ergonomist, what are you actually doing all day?
Okay, so picture this. You get sent to a factory
Okay.
to observe the workers on an assembly line.
Okay, got it. And you're looking for ergonomic issues.
Mhm.
So, are they having to reach for things awkwardly? Are they using a lot of force? Do they have any signs of, carpal tunnel or anything?
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It's like you're using your training to actually see things that other people probably wouldn't even notice.
That's so cool.
Right.
Yeah, I like it. It's like you're a detective.
Exactly. But you start collecting data. Like maybe you have some special software that analyzes people's posture, or you're measuring how much force they're using to do their jobs.
Oh, wow.
You might even just talk to the workers and be like, hey, what feels uncomfortable to you?
Oh, that's smart. Just ask.
Right. You're putting together the pieces, getting a full picture of the situation.
Okay, so then what? So you figured out the problem. What happens next?
So that's when the real problem solving comes in. As that entry-level person, you'd work with, the more senior ergonomists.
Makes sense. You learn from the best.
Exactly. And they'd help you brainstorm different solutions, whether it's like rearranging the workstations, maybe finding a better tool to use, or even just creating a training program for employees,
Yeah.
like teaching them how to lift things correctly.
Oh, that's such a good idea. I never thought about that.
Right. It's all about combining that, fresh perspective with the wisdom and experience of those who have been doing it for a while.
Oh, totally. So then, as you move up the ranks, let's say you become a junior ergonomist now, what changes?
Well, you get to take on more responsibility.
Cool.
You're not just identifying the problems anymore. You're really the one designing those solutions and putting them into practice.
Oh, that's so
So
cool.
you might do like more in-depth assessments.
Okay.
You're using your knowledge of biomechanics, that's how bodies move, and anthropometry, which is like the study of human body measurements. It's really fascinating.
It is fascinating.
All to figure out like how demanding a specific task is.
Okay, that makes sense. So there's a real science behind all of this.
Oh, yeah, totally. This isn't just about making things feel good, although that's part of it, of course.
Right.
It's about making sure that things are better, safer, and more efficient in the long run.
It's about the big picture.
Exactly. And, I think once you get even more experience, that's when you could potentially specialize.
Oh, telling me more about that. I think we touched on that a little bit earlier. Like, what are some areas you could specialize in?
Well, RoleCatcher mentioned a bunch. You could work in manufacturing, like we just talked about, healthcare, tech.
Okay.
Research is a really interesting one, too.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, imagine helping to design a completely ergonomic office space with an architect,
Oh, that'd be
or
cool.
working with engineers to develop safer tools and equipment.
Oh, yeah.
You could even help design software that's more comfortable and intuitive to use.
That's so important, especially now. Like, everyone's on their computers all day.
Right.
Yeah.
And as technology keeps changing, the demand for people with this kind of expertise is only going to go up.
Oh, for sure. There's no doubt about that. So we've covered a ton of ground, from the entry-level stuff to the challenges and rewards of being an ergonomist.
It's a lot.
It is. But how do you actually land the job? Luckily, RoleCatcher gave us some pretty great tips on that, too.
They really did. One thing I thought was super helpful was their advice on making your portfolio stand out.
Because it's not enough to just say, I love ergonomics, hire me.
Right. Got to show them what you can do.
Okay, that makes sense. But what does that even mean for ergonomics? Like, is it just pictures of comfy chairs?
Not exactly. It's more like think of the problems you've solved, the cool designs you've come up with, and then show those off.
Okay, I like
Like maybe you intern somewhere and help them redesign their workstations.
Right.
Or in school, you design some kind of assistive technology.
Oh, yeah, put that in there.
Exactly. Anything that proves you can actually apply this stuff in the real world.
Joe, don't tell.
Exactly. And get creative with it. You can use pictures, diagrams, even videos.
Oh, that's a good idea. Make it pop.
Make them remember you.
Okay, that's good advice. Now, what about the interview? RoleCatcher had some stuff on that too, right?
Oh, yeah. There's an awesome list of common interview questions.
Oh, that's so helpful.
I know. It's like a sneak peek into the hiring manager's brain.
Totally. Give me an example. Like, what kind of question?
Okay, so one was, tell me about a time you had a really tough ergonomics problem and how you solved it.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Right. But if you know that's coming, you can think about it ahead of time, come up with a good example, practice your answer.
Be prepared.
Exactly. And it's not just about having an answer, it's about how you tell it.
Right. Make it a good story.
Exactly.
I like it. Any other tips from RoleCatcher on totally crushing that interview?
Well, they also said to really pay attention to the job description
Okay.
and make sure you connect your experience back to what they're looking for.
Oh, that's smart.
Like you're tailoring your answers to that specific job.
So we've talked about education and what the work is like and portfolios and interviews. Is there anything else people should know about, like, breaking into this field?
Oh, networking. Don't forget networking.
Oh, right. Of course.
Role catchers really stress that. Go to conferences, join industry groups,
Yeah.
meet people.
Put yourself out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You never know what doors might open.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating. We've learned so much about the world of ergonomics today.
It's been fun.
I think if someone out there is looking for a career where they can make a real difference and they're fascinated by this idea of, like, designing things that work better for people,
Yes,
this could be it. This could be the one.
I think so. And remember, RoleCatcher has even more info on this and tons of other careers too.
They really are a treasure trove of career advice.
They are.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap things up. Go out there, make some ergonomic magic happen.